What you doing there? You guys making a podcast?
Why would you think that's a good idea?
Podcast?
You two are the dumbest people I've ever seen.
That's janky.
Hello and welcome back to the Jank podcast. We are finally ready to go back in the studio. If you haven't noticed, for the past few days I haven't been in the studio. That's because we are cleaning the studio. You know, during these COVID times, it's all about keeping stuff clean. So let's go take a look, shall we? Oh man, it's been a hot second in there. Look at that. Oh my god. It is an absolute mess in this room. Who's been playing with Lego?
That was you.
Oh, yeah. Today's episode is brought to you by OCC March. As always, I absolutely love OCC March. They are the greatest platform to sell merchandise on. Whether you have 5 Twitch streamers or you're one of the biggest people on YouTube, OCC March has you hooked up. They host the site for you and do all the heavy lifting. All you have to do is design your art and your shirts, send them the designs, and they start setting it all up for you for incredible prices. Tell them Jake sent ya. It's a real hookup at OCC March. Hello! I already said that. Don't know why I'm saying hello again, but welcome back! Usually I do historic videos talking about history, or it's an interview. And today I'm also doing history, but I'm adding a little pizzazz to it. It's movie pizzazz because I want to talk about horror movies. Now, you're going to say probably one of two things. First of all, Jake, it's mid-November. Why would you not talk about horror movies when it was closer to Halloween? And that's because I do what I want here. This is the Jank podcast. There's no rules. I'm also literally talking about a subject that Everett, technically my co-host, by the way, this podcast has a co-host who's just never here. Everett is technically the other half of this podcast who's never here, and it's not his fault. I just film at random times, and that's the magic of the Jank podcast. It's inconsistent. Anyways, Everett and I talked about horror movies way back. You can go find that video if you want, but I thought I would touch a little bit on horror movies because I made my own crappy horror movie. Now, I call it crappy because I'm a self-deprecating kind of guy. Maybe it's good. It's not, but maybe. Who knows? I just want to do a quick look at the history of horror movies because as someone who loves history, I think one of the best time capsules for history is horror movies. I think horror movies are critically underlooked and underrated. So let's travel backwards through time. Right now, 2020. Around this time, I would say a good time mark is going to be 2015 to 2020. Some of the biggest horror movies we see are Hereditary. Hereditary is going to be something that's based off of the broken family. The 2000s has been a consistent broken family kind of thing. We have seen families have divorce, be less connected than ever. That's just something that's been happening more and more throughout time, which makes Hereditary hit so well. I think every horror movie that hits well is because it's a great kind of time capsule. And you also can see that with the movie Get Out. It was a incredible look at what's going on in America right now when it comes to race. 30 years ago, it would be a completely different subject of communication, but now it's this, and that's why this movie did so well. Granted, that's just my opinion. I could be completely off. Feel free to wreck me on it. That's just my opinion, and I'm going to keep giving my opinion. We then see post 9/11 horror, which is going to be more angry. It's one of the angriest times in our history. So now I'm looking at from 2001 to like mid-2000s, and you have movies like Saw. You have movies that were called torture porn because it was an angry time in cinema. It's when some of the worst reboots were made, but Saw was very successful, and I do think I like the Saw movies, but I can see why people were offended by it. It's so angry and gruesome, and we saw so much of this anger post 9/11. And then there's this small time frame from the late 90s to right before 2001. The 2000s gave us movies like we had Final Destination, we had Scream, we had Blair Witch Project. Those are going to be two different categories. Blair Witch and Final Destination is an unseen force causing problems. This unseen force is something where America in the late 90s and early 2000s was kind of like, where are we going next? We didn't know the tragedies that were around the corner, so we dealt with an unseen force of just that's what was scaring Americans at the time. And then we're also dealing with Scream, which is a parody of slashers while still being absolutely terrifying. It's a commentary on the slasher genre, which made the slasher genre scary in the 80s, was because Ronald Reagan had created the idea of the nuclear family, the perfect family, nuclear family, the perfect family. And the 90s was kind of commentating on how we are moving away from that, separating ourselves from that while it was still in the back of our minds, aka Scream. It's still showing the slashers coming to a home, wrecking it, but it does it with a twist. So now we go to the 80s. The slasher genre has been around since the 70s, but the 80s is now bringing the slasher to our homes. This is showing that we're being now invaded by these monsters. So the idea of the perfect family being ruined is absolutely terrifying to us. And that's what made these 80s slashers so scary. Then you have the 70s slashers where it's us going to that location, almost like a commentary on the types of war that were in the 60s and 70s, an angry time, Vietnam War, Korean War, which is obviously going to be before, way before the 70s. But both of those are still getting commentated on by saying we are a force going to a destination and then being murdered. That's what it's being shown when you see Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's a very big commentary on the Vietnam War and different wars. There's the gas crisis, which leads these kids who are traveling to a dangerous Midland, Texas, where it's all poverty-ridden because of the crisis that we were dealing with. They're going to a location that leads to their demise. It's a commentary on the war on communism more. But then we start looking at the 50s and 60s. The 50s and 60s are going to show us sci-fi horrors because we just dealt with World War II, where some of the biggest scientific movements of all time were made, but we were scared of that. We had no idea we could create a weapon of mass destruction, and now it's at our doorstep. What else can science create? That's what creates the idea of zombies, science going wrong, giant ants, giant monsters. It's nature running awry because we created it with evil science. So it creates this idea of science is scary. Science creates these horror movies. And then you jump into the 50s, which is Godzilla. I'm jumping to Japan now because 1954 is when we first see Godzilla in Japan, which is going to be a commentary on the nuclear bombs that were dropped. It never directly even mentions America, but that movie, Godzilla, represents it. It's Japan obviously did not think, oh, our cities deserve to be destroyed. And that's what Godzilla represents. And there's so many references to America, World War II, the tragedies of the bombs being dropped. Whether you think it was a necessity or not, everyone can admit it was a destruction of life and areas and something no human would ever imagine or wish upon an enemy ever again. At least that's what I hope, being someone who loves others. But horror aspect, it shows in Godzilla. And Godzilla was actually inspired by King Kong, which came out in the 1930s. In the 1930s, we see horror in a completely different light than any other thing. Horror is kind of just really starting to kick off, right? You've got King Kong, obviously, but then you've also got the Universal monsters that came before that even. It is such iconic look into horror is how well they fit with the times, because some of the earliest horrors are just freaks of nature. The Invisible Man, Frankenstein, the movie Freaks. It's just taking a look at like deformities in humans, because during those times, to the average American, a strong man, beautiful woman. That was the ideology that we then see get questioned in horror. Now that I've talked about so much iconic horror, I think it's a great time to drop into the iconic horror movie I made, The Man Who Went Missing in Blackhawk County. Alright, so after talking about absolutely incredible horror movies, I feel like I should talk about the crappy one I made. I've always been a fan of horror, so I figured I should make a horror movie and just try it. So it's a comedy horror documentary. So the whole premise is it takes hints from like the Blair Witch Project and stuff, but it shows more of a documentary, but just shows like how so many people of today will do anything to try to get clout, even risk their own lives and possibly die, which happens to our brave adventurers. Basically, they are covering a mystery that happened in the 70s that starts to bleed into their reality and later may or may not lead to their demise. this horror movie is an hour and 8 minutes. Obviously, it's not the greatest thing ever, but I had a lot of fun making it. It's on my second channel called Jake Trumper's OK Films. Up until that point, I had only made a few comedy sketches, so it is something like I can look on and be proud of. And we made it on a $44 budget. So an hour and 8 minute long film on a $44 budget is something that I'm very proud of because we got all of our friends and family to do it for free. I got to be acting in it. I acted, did most of the makeup. I did a significant amount and put a lot of time and effort into it. So even though I can look at it and be like, it's ugly, it's still something I made and I'm genuinely proud of. So it was a super fun activity to be a part of. And oh my God, my cat's meowing. Salt, are you okay? Yeah, she's fine. She's fine. So it was an awesome project that I don't know. I don't even know fully why I'm talking about it. It was so much fun because I also did a campaign for it on TikTok where I pretended like it was real, which is so cringe because I've looked at stuff before and been like, that's not real. And then I was doing it. I was like, oh, Jake, you're part of the problem. But overall, I genuinely had fun making it. It was a good time. And if you've got an hour to burn, I highly recommend. No, I don't highly recommend it. I welcome you. Yeah, there we go. I welcome you to go check it out. It's called The Man Who Went Missing in Blackhawk County. May someday be my only IMDb credit. Maybe someday I'll do more movies. Who knows? I'm kind of an actor. You can go check it out and be like, wow, Jake, you're awful. And then that'd be so funny. It's like you're like I'm a Jake Trumper fan, and then you watch it and you're like, I hate Jake. He's the worst. That'd be hilarious. That's not what I'm trying to do. Why is my cat Salt? Hey. That's terrifying. I'm talking about like horror stuff, and now my cat's running around terrified. I'm not in my studio right now recording this part. She is freaking out, bro. It's like, hey, shut up. I'm trying to make some magic here. I'm trying to make some podcast magic. But I really hope you enjoyed the history aspect of horror, and you don't have to watch the movie. I can't stress enough, the movie is actually not that important that I made. It was just a fun little passion project. What is important is to not respect, but truly enjoy what horror movies offer. It is truly like a time capsule into what the time periods were without directly showing you what was going on. Because you can watch plenty of movies and stuff and learn about time periods. But this is such a great commentary on it. So hopefully my movie doesn't make you absolutely hate me. You can have some fun with it like I did. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Next episode, we have another guest. It is a literal voice actor his voice sounds like sweet creamy butter. So that's going to be a lot of fun. While you wait for that, also, thank you so much to everyone who listens to the Jank podcast. As you know, we're janky, we're goofy. The fact that you put up with us truly means a lot. I love you guys so much. While you wait for the next episode, though, go check out a horror movie. Let me know what you thought about it. Literally, all my social medias are open to DMs. Let me know what you think of horror movies and what your favorite horror movies are in the comments. All right, thank you guys so much for listening. You are the best troop. You are the troop. Till next time.